Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just got into a little bit of the win totals for the Big Ten, broke down who I think is too high, who's too low, who's right on the money in that conference, and now let's get into some Cinderella teams from that conference. The Big Ten is very, very interesting this upcoming year. You have Ohio State, you have Oregon, you have Michigan, you have Penn State up at the top. We know about those teams, there's no two ways about that. Yesterday we did break down the SEC. You have A&M and OU were the teams that I highlighted. Frankly, I don't love my A&M pick because their win total is at least 8.5. I think that's not too much of a Cinderella. So I'm going to set a little bit of a moniker for myself, the same one that Tom Fornelli set when he was doing this. The win total has to be 7.5 or lower. That's just going to be the rule going forward. I feel like that's the right way to go about business. If that was the rule for the SEC, I likely would have gone Auburn in that place, but that's beside the point at this point. But let's get to the two teams I have for the Big Ten, and I think for me, it starts with Nebraska. I think this team is so fascinating. Matt Rule going into year two. In year two at Temple, he won 4 more games than he did in year one. In year two at Baylor, he won 6 more games than he did in year one. So if he follows that trend, he's winning 10 games this upcoming year. Now, I'm not necessarily saying he will, but this team is going to be good. They're going to have the ability to possibly do that. I think Dylan Raiola is obviously got the weight of the entire Cornhusker Nation on his shoulders. There's no two ways about that. This team is under a ton of pressure, and he's likely number one on that list. When you're the quarterback of a team that has been out of, favor for quite some time, when your dad's on the roster or when your dad's on the coaching staff, when he came to the school, when a lot of stuff is being put on you to be the savior of this program, it's going to be a lot of pressure, but he has plenty to work with. The wide receiver group is a really fun one over there. You have Jamal Banks coming over from Wake Forest. You have Isaiah Nair. You have guys like Malachi Coleman, Jalen Lloyd, 2 guys that definitely could have breakout seasons this upcoming year. I think it's a really, really fun group that absolutely is much better than what Nebraska has had even last year. There's Jamal Banks there. Will likely be the wide receiver 1 for this team. And then you have Gabe Ervin in the backfield. I think this run game is going to be solid. They're going to be able to move the ball. The offensive line returns 3 starters, also adds Micah Mazuka from Florida, who's an absolute big boy. He's going to be able to eat up a ton of space, definitely be a good run blocker, and help out this offensive line. So I think they're going to be able to get pushed against most of the defensive lines they're going to face in the conference. There are a couple that are going to be really hard to push off the ball, the Michigan, Oregon, Ohio States of the world, but at the end of the day, this is going to be a really solid offensive line, and that's obviously going to help with the run game and help with Dylan Raiola being who he can be, which I think is a really, really good player. But the defense is the comfort zone for this team. It's the comfort zone for all of the Nebraska fans out there. I'm sure they're going to be a top 15 team in the country when it comes to defense. Last year, I believe they were number 11 in the country, if I'm not mistaken, and I think they could take another step forward this upcoming year. Guys like MJ Sherman, Bly Hill, I think are going to be hugely important for this team. MJ Sherman, I think, has only been building up throughout his time at Nebraska since coming over from UGA, and I think he has the ability to totally break out this year. A very good edge rusher that has a ton in his bag, and I think he's going to be a really big-time player. And then Bly Hill on that back end, he was a big-time transfer they got, so definitely someone they can really rely on that back end. Definitely someone that can kind of keep a blanket on opposing offenses. So I really like this team. I think they have the ability to do some really, really remarkable things. And frankly, when you can score 20 to 24 points a game and win a lot of them, you're going to be really successful. So having guys like MJ Sherman, having Bly Hill, having tons of returning starters on this defense in general is going to be a huge help to this team, and will definitely add a layer to this team that people might not be ready for, frankly. It's a very, very fascinating team, and I think with Matt Rule at the helm, you're going to get good coaching. I think as long as Dylan Raiola comes along and is the player that a lot of people expect him to be, you're going to have a really fun season. Now, I think there could be some, up and down points with Dylan Raiola, and he could struggle a little bit, but when you have that defense behind you that's going to help him out, I think it's going to be hugely helpful for his success. So it's a fascinating team. I think everyone's kind of circling them in the back of their mind, but I think they're going to be really good, frankly, and I think they have the ability to not only make noise in this conference, but maybe even get to Indy if the cards fall right and they're able to play the right amount of or the right football at the right time. So I think this is a really good team. I think they have the ability to play with pretty much anyone in the conference. But the other team that I want to highlight is a little bit more off the beaten path, but still a very good team in my mind. and that's Wisconsin. I think this team has the ability under year 2, again, under Luke Fickell, a new coach coming in, like Matt Rule into the Big Ten a year ago. They're going to get, not a lot of talk. Let's just be totally honest. They're not necessarily the most interesting team in the Big Ten when it comes to this upcoming year. Everyone's going to talk about Oregon and USC and Washington coming in. They're going to talk about Ohio State and Michigan and Penn State up at the top. And Wisconsin just kind of play their game. And I think for everything for this team starts with Tyler Van Dyke. I think we all understand that. He's lost pretty much every single believer that he had when he was at Miami. I'm just not one of them. I'll be totally honest. I think this dude has the ability to get back to that sophomore season and play some really good football. And I think a change of scenery is hugely important. I think some of the staff changes, both head coach and OC-wise, did not help him out when he was at Miami. And I think he's definitely in a situation that feels a little bit more comfortable to him. I think this offense makes more sense to his skill set. I think he's definitely in a position where he can kind of just let it rip and play football again instead of worrying about, being the guy for Miami and being everything for that team. He can just go play football, and it helps that you have one of the most dangerous run games in the entire country. When you have Ches Malusi and Tawi Walker, I think it's one of the most underrated running back duos in the country, and they can do essentially anything you need for them. You have 3 guys returning on the front that started 13 games a year ago on the offensive line. You have Jake Renfro and Joe Bruner kind of stepping into bigger positions at the center and right guard positions, but as long as no injuries happen on this offensive line, they're going to be solid. Now, if you do have a couple of guys that go down, it doesn't sound like they're too confident in their depth over there in Madison, so definitely a little bit of worry there. You're going to have to kind of fight an uphill battle there and hope that everyone stays upright, because if they don't, this could be a little bit tough of a season. And then you get into the defense. It starts with Hunter Wohler. This guy is an absolute beast. He's one of the best safeties in the entire country this upcoming year, with a lot of good safeties in this country. When you talk about Malachi Starks, Caleb Downs, Xavier Watts over at Notre Dame, there's tons of really, really good players. Hunter is right there with all of them. He's really, really incredible. And then you bring in someone like Tackett Curtis from USC, who didn't get to play too much in the spring because he was recovering from an injury, but I think he's going to be a fantastic player for them. I think he's going to be huge in the middle of that defense for not only 2024, but multiple years to come down the road. And then you have Leon Lowry coming in, absolutely huge at linebacker, has been great throughout spring and definitely someone they love over there. And then you have John Pius as well coming in to kind of anchor the middle of that defense. I think it's going to be a really good group. It's not necessarily going to be that dominating group that totally shuts down every offense they face, but absolutely can be a group that can compete with every single offense that they're going to face, and definitely a group that absolutely can be big-time players. So I really like this team overall. I think one of the biggest things that people talk about with Wisconsin is the run game, is the aggression, but the pass game is going to need to take a little bit of a step up, and obviously that starts with Tyler Van Dyke, but also you have Will Paulding, who kind of came onto the scene a little bit last year as wide receiver 1, will likely be that again this upcoming year. But you have Bryson Green, you have Vinny Anthony the second, that absolutely can make steps forward for this team and be big time players. So I think this team is really interesting. It doesn't necessarily have all the bells and whistles that a lot of the other teams do, but I think they're going to play really good football. I think Luke Fickell and his staff is going to put together really good game plans. They're not going to make it easy on a lot of teams, and definitely will be a very interesting group to watch. So there's still some other teams that I'm watching in the Big Ten. Iowa, USC are 2 other teams that I think are going to be really interesting. If Iowa can figure out that offense, if USC can figure out that defense, it's going to be fascinating to watch those 2 teams develop. And then, there's a ton of other teams that absolutely will have plenty to say, but those are my 2 picks for Cinderella Watch in the Big Ten. We'll do the Big 12 tomorrow, but we're going to take our final break here. When we come back, we're going to talk about the top 10 domino players in the upcoming season. These are the players that not only will have effect in their team, but could have effect with the conference and college football and the playoff and everything in between. So I want to break down those players as I see it right after this, so stick with us.